In a world filled with challenges, confusion, and sometimes isolation, the teachings of Jesus are more relevant and transformative than ever before. Jesus didn't just speak to the people of his time. His words are alive, reaching across centuries to offer hope, guidance, and a path to a life filled with meaning, purpose, and love. When we read the Bible, we're not just looking at historical texts or ancient wisdom, but at a living guidebook that teaches us how to live today. Jesus taught us through parables, miracles, and his profound example of selflessness, kindness, and unwavering faith. He walked among the poor, the suffering, and the outcasts, showing us that God's love knows no bounds and that each of us has a place in his kingdom. He reminded us that we're not alone, that we have a loving Father in heaven, and that through him we find strength, forgiveness, and the courage to face whatever life brings. The teachings of Jesus begin with one fundamental truth: love. He taught us to love God with all our hearts and to love our neighbors as ourselves. This may sound simple, but when we look at our world today, we see that this commandment is as challenging as it is transformative. In a time where divisions and conflicts seem to pull us apart, Jesus' words call us to rise above, to be peacemakers, and to bring kindness where there is strife. Imagine a world where we all live by this one teaching. How different would our communities, our workplaces, our families be if we chose love above all else? In following Jesus, we learn not just to love others, but to love ourselves in a way that honors God. This doesn't mean arrogance or self-centeredness, but a deep respect for the person God created each of us to be. Jesus calls us to see ourselves through his eyes with grace and compassion. In moments of self-doubt or struggle, we can turn to his teachings, remembering that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that we are cherished, and that we have a purpose in God's plan. As we grow in love, Jesus also teaches us about humility. In a world that often celebrates power, success, and self-promotion, Jesus reminds us that true greatness comes through humility and service. When we serve others, we are following in his footsteps. Jesus washed his disciples' feet, fed the hungry, healed the sick, and welcomed those society had cast aside. Through every action, he showed that serving others is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. Humility opens our hearts to God's work in our lives and frees us from the burden of pride, allowing us to live in genuine connection with others. One of the most powerful lessons Jesus taught was forgiveness. This is perhaps one of the hardest teachings to put into practice, yet it is also one of the most liberating. Jesus forgave those who wronged him, even as he was on the cross, showing us that forgiveness is not about condoning hurt, but about freeing ourselves from bitterness and resentment. Forgiveness brings healing to our hearts and peace to our souls. In a world that often encourages holding grudges or seeking revenge, Jesus calls us to forgive, to let go of anger, and to find freedom in God's mercy. Trusting God is another profound teaching that Jesus emphasized. He showed us that faith isn't just about believing in God's existence, but about relying on him completely. When we trust God, we're acknowledging that he holds our lives in his hands, and we can rest in the assurance that he has a plan for us. This doesn't mean life will be easy, but with faith, we find the courage to face our challenges, knowing that God walks beside us. Jesus' life was filled with trials, yet he remained faithful, trusting in his Father's will even when he faced the cross. His example teaches us to surrender our fears, our plans, and our lives to God, trusting that his love and wisdom are greater than we can imagine. Prayer was at the heart of Jesus' relationship with God, and he taught us to pray with sincerity and faith. Prayer isn't just a ritual or a list of requests. It's a way to connect with God, to open our hearts, to seek his guidance, and to find comfort in his presence. Through prayer, we invite God into our daily lives, our struggles, our joys, and our hopes. When we pray, we're reminded that we are never alone and that God is with us in every moment. Jesus showed us how to pray with humility and trust, saying, "Thy will be done." This prayer teaches us to let go of our need for control and to allow God's perfect plan to unfold. In his teachings, Jesus also warned us about the dangers of materialism. He taught us to seek treasures in heaven rather than on earth, reminding us that worldly wealth and success are fleeting. In our consumer-driven world, it's easy to become focused on what we own, yet Jesus calls us to look beyond material possessions and to find fulfillment in our relationship with God and in the love we share with others. He taught us that life's true riches come from generosity, kindness, and living a life that reflects God's love. When we shift our focus from acquiring to giving, we experience a joy and peace that surpasses any material wealth. One of the most inspiring aspects of Jesus' teachings is his call to be the light of the world. In every word, every action, and every moment, he demonstrated a life filled with love, compassion, and faith. He calls each of us to shine his light, to be a source of hope, and to bring his love to those around us. We can be the hands and feet of Jesus, reaching out to the lonely, comforting the grieving, and sharing his message of hope with a world in need. Living out Jesus' teachings isn't always easy, especially in a world that often seems to value everything he warned us against. But as we draw closer to God, we find that his strength becomes our strength, his love fills our hearts, and his peace transforms our lives. When we choose to follow Jesus, we're not just making a commitment to a set of beliefs, we're embracing a way of life that brings joy, purpose, and a deep sense of belonging. So, as we go about our days, let's remember that each moment is an opportunity to live out the teachings of Jesus. Whether we're at work, at home, or with friends, let's choose kindness over judgment, forgiveness over resentment, and love over fear. Let's walk in faith, trusting that God has a purpose for each of us and that his love is the foundation on which we build our lives. Jesus' teachings aren't just words on a page, they're an invitation to a life filled with hope, compassion, and peace. By living his words, we become a reflection of his love in the world, and through us, others can come to know the depth of God's love. Thank you for joining me in this journey of faith, and may we all grow closer to God, finding the strength and courage to live as Jesus taught us, today and always.